Today, we're diving into some shocking and important facts about the Ku Klux Klan, also known as the KKK. Now, I know what you're thinking, John, why are we talking about the KKK? It's like finding out your milk went bad a week ago. Unpleasant, but ultimately something you just want to throw away. And you'd be right, on all counts. But here's the thing, folks, the KKK, much like that carton of sour milk, didn't just materialize out of thin air. Its existence, however repugnant, is a stain on American history, and understanding how it came to be is vital if we ever want to ensure it doesn't happen again. So buckle up, kids, because we're about to take a deep, uncomfortable dive into the origins of this hate group and the lasting impact it's had on America. The year is 1865. The Civil War has just ended, leaving the South in ruins physically, economically, and perhaps most importantly, emotionally. Imagine, if you will, a group of disgruntled former Confederate soldiers still clinging to the remnants of a lost cause, nursing their wounds and their resentment. They gather in Pulaski, Tennessee, a town with more history than prospects, and decide to form a club. Now you might be picturing something benign like a book club, or perhaps a particularly aggressive quilting circle. But no, my friends, this was not the case. This was the birth of the Ku Klux Klan. Initially, they tried to pass themselves off as nothing more than a social club, a harmless fraternity for veterans. They even adopted a silly, almost whimsical name, the Ku Klux Adelphon, Greek for circle of brothers, you know, just a bunch of lads reminiscing about the good old days of owning other human beings. But behind the ridiculous costumes and the secret handshakes, a sinister truth festered. The KKK was never truly about brotherhood, it was about power, specifically the power of white supremacy in a nation grappling with the newly acquired freedom of its black citizens. And they weren't afraid to use violence, intimidation, and terror to maintain that supposed power. And who better to lead this merry band of bigots than Nathan Bedford Forrest, a former Confederate general with a penchant for, shall we say, questionable tactics. This was a man who, during the war, had ordered the massacre of hundreds of black Union soldiers at Fort Pillow, Tennessee, an act so horrific it's still debated by historians today. Forrest, now the self-proclaimed Grand Wizard of the KK, because of course they needed a ridiculous title to match their ridiculous costumes, set about formalizing the Klan's structure and expanding its reach. Under his leadership, the KKK transformed from a group of disgruntled veterans into a well-organized, terrifying force to be reckoned with. They terrorized black communities, intimidated voters, and even targeted white Republicans who dared to support Reconstruction efforts. Their weapon of choice? Fear. Through lynchings, whippings, and burnings, the KKK sought to instill terror in the hearts of black Americans, hoping to crush their spirits and deter them from exercising their newfound rights. Now, you might be thinking, surely the government stepped in and put a stop to this, right? Well, the answer, my friends, is a resounding kind of... See, while public outrage against the Klan's atrocities eventually led to the passage of federal laws aimed at suppressing them, enforcement was, shall we say, inconsistent at best. By the 1870s, the first era of the KKK had largely faded. But let's be clear, their disappearance wasn't due to a sudden surge of national conscience. It was more like pushing a particularly nasty weed back into the soil. Sure, it looked gone, but the roots remained, waiting for the right conditions to sprout again. And sprout they did. Fast forward to the early 20th century, and America finds itself facing a new wave of social change. Immigration is booming, cities are growing, and traditional values are being challenged. Enter the second Ku Klux Klan, fueled not just by racism, but also by anti-immigrant, anti-Catholic, and anti-Semitic sentiments. And what, you ask, sparked this resurgence? Well, it certainly didn't help that a wildly popular 1915 film called The Birth of a Nation glorified the KKK as heroic defenders of white womanhood, a claim so laughably false it would be comical if it weren't so tragic. The second iteration of the Klan was bigger, bolder, and even more brazen than its predecessor. They held public rallies, infiltrated law enforcement, and even held elected office in some parts of the country. And then came the 1950s and 60s, a period marked by the civil rights movement, a time when black Americans, led by courageous figures like Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, and countless others, rose up to demand the equality they had been denied for far too long. The KKK, threatened by this push for justice, responded in the only way they knew how, with violence. They firebombed churches, murdered activists, and terrorized communities, desperate to maintain their grip on a system built on white supremacy. But this time, something was different. The civil rights movement, with its message of love, equality, and non-violent resistance, captured the hearts and minds of not just Americans, but people around the world. The KKK, exposed for the hateful, cowardly organization it truly was, found itself increasingly ostracized and marginalized. Their membership dwindled, their influence waned, and their reign of terror, while leaving an indelible scar on American history, began to fade. Understanding the history of the KKK is crucial to recognizing the impact of hate groups in America. While the Klan may no longer hold the same power it once did, its legacy of hate continues to cast a long shadow. It's a reminder that prejudice and discrimination can take many forms and that we must remain vigilant in fighting against them. Stay informed and stay vigilant.